who else turns up as we go on. So yes, we are recording the meeting. So welcome, Nicole and Antonio, to the second of two coffee talks. We're going to discuss the findings of the phase 2 of the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, funded project for the WASH roadmaps. This is initiative 1.1, the WASH Hub. So we can schedule other chats, or more than happy for you to come back with questions, either by email or you can you can connect up by Teams. So the WASH Hub is set out to be a virtual space for field level WASH practitioners to be able to access key technical resources, to have a strong idea of what events are happening, and to access training courses, or to understand when training events are coming up. So the three people involved, myself, but very much myself, Toby Gould, as the Director of WASH Technology for CAWST, the Centre for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology, Dan Meeking, the Director of Digital Services for CAWST, and also Olivier Mills, a consultant who's been very much instrumental all the way through these phase 1 and phase 2 of this project. I guess, I don't know, Dan or Olivia, if you want to introduce yourselves a bit more, you're happy with that.
Olivia, why don't you go ahead, and then I'll do a real quick slideshow and get started.
Okay. I'm going to be. I used to be sitting on the meetings here for the roadmap in the beginning. I supported sort of CAWST joining the roadmap, I think, in a couple of years ago, and now so I consult with them to support them with anything to do, I guess, with WASH or digital tech and WASH, with Dan mostly, and helped with phase 1 report. So we did all of the initial, and I chatted with some of you, I think, regarding sort of your input into what the WASH Hub would look like in phase 1, and then leading into this phase 2 refinement of understanding of what's the best path for it. That's my background in this context.
Great. And then, I'm Dan. So I work on the digital services side. So that's the various like online resources, service delivery tools, the online presence that CAWST has that contributes to our service delivery. So very, very much picking up and running with the work that Olivier did in the organization over the years. So there's a lot of overlap in the work that Olivier has done and the work that I'm working on now. So we're in regular contact. Okay, so I have a very short slide deck. It's just a couple slides to just point out some of the highlights of the findings from the report. We're going to assume that people have read it. If not, join into the conversation as best you can, and we can provide a copy of the report for you to review as well. And really want to use most of the time for discussion and ask any questions, listen to any pushback, ideas, really whatever's on people's minds after we have a quick look at the slides. So without further ado, I realized I shared my screen a minute ago. I got ahead of myself, but I will reshare that. Give me 1 second.
In the meantime, I'll reshare the link of the report that's available on the website in the chat.
Thank you. Okay. People able to see that slide now full screen? Toby or someone?
Yep,
yes, all good.
Okay, perfect, great. I lost my view of people's faces. Okay, so really quickly, we're here to talk about WASH Hub phase 2. And so just like to bring people along in terms of a rough timeline, phase 1 was completed in something around May 2022. And it was, its initial scoping, gathering ideas around like what could or should WASH Hub be. I think some of the key tagline that came out of that is that it needs to be like a service-oriented one-stop shop for WASH-related things. However, it identified 3 areas that required further investigation. One was if we're going to build a new wash hub, we need to have a plan for how it can live and thrive alongside current and, I'm sure new, not yet developed sector platforms. The reality is that there's lots out there that has value, and we can't imagine a world where we're just going to turn everything that exists off if some mythical new wash hub appears tomorrow. So how do these things live together and thrive? The second was recognizing the importance of integrating online and human interaction and specifically facilitating peer-to-peer exchanges. So what could WashHub do to integrate those experiences? And then the third one was just asking questions around making sure we're clear on what ownership, governance, and resourcing needs to be for a project like WashHub to succeed and thrive, especially over time. The key pitfall that we wanted to make sure to avoid was thinking of this as like a short-term project that needed to be funded to build it, when in reality, yes, we need that, but you need a long time horizon of funding to make sure that the project really succeeds, because it does need ongoing support and maintenance. So that brought us into phase 2, which we're wrapping up now-ish. And the work here was to apply learnings from CAWST's own operations, our own efforts to thrive along other platforms, our own efforts to integrate online and offline service delivery, our own experience in various projects that could give us some guidance on ownership, governance, and resourcing, and try to summarize that and provide concrete recommendations and suggestions for what WashHub should be. And that really is what the report is. To summarize some of the key findings, as it relates to existing platforms, the practical recommendation is, if we want to live alongside existing platforms, it really requires us to have a high degree of acceptance of how work actually gets done around the world. And, examples of that are just, different parts of the world have wildly different, I'd say, established standards, even if they aren't formal standards, about what communication channels are used. WhatsApp is very predominant in certain parts of the world, and we know there are lots of thriving communities related to water, sanitation, and hygiene that are on, WhatsApp groups and communities. But, that's not true everywhere in the world. For human interaction, peer support, the importance of human-to-human interaction, it was universally in all of the discussions or interviews that we had, very, very high priority. And so we just need to keep that in mind, especially as we're implementing and moving forward with this project. And how do we make sure it feels like a service where there are humans that can help, and it's not just a static library. And then the governance recommendation is that they have strong belief that there really needs to be one organization that has expertise in providing tech support, and running an online network, as the primary owner of the development of the Wash Hub. And who that is a big question to be decided, but there needs to be one organization that is viewed as capable and has kind of like the trust of the sector overall to really drive this. And then we just can't escape putting bullet points around artificial intelligence. It's such a hot topic. It did come up in lots of our conversations. And I'm just going to say, since we released the report, the landscape continues to change. I think if there's questions about artificial intelligence, it's great that Olivier's joined the call, because many of you may have seen some of the non-Wash Hub related work that he's also up to that's squarely in the space of AI. So we've got probably the world's expert in Wash plus AI on the call, should anyone care to go down that topic. So I'll leave that for discussion in the follow-up here if people want to get into it. And just the second last slide before we can get into the discussions, just a reminder of the 3 key components that we outlined as what WashHub needs to have. One is there's this help desk where people can ask questions and get quality and probably reasonably rapid responses depending on the context that they're working in. It obviously needs to have a resource library, so there's lots of WASH technical information out there. The WashHub obviously needs to be a great window into all of that for people that are seeking information. And then the third one is the concept of hubs or communities or topical interest groups, but the concept of a hub, which is something that could be spun up quite quickly when we want to build a new community around an area of interest or a crisis that may be happening in the world is a key part of the hubs. And then just a note, there are discussions that started somewhat recently as part of the WASH roadmap midterm review and are ongoing around possibly merging some roadmap initiatives together. So you won't see anything in the report related to the discussions that have happened around possibly bringing the data repository. That's initiative 1.2, or online training courses, which is 2.1, kind of together with the WASH Hub. I'd say at a high level, we're supportive of those discussions. It makes sense, but the timing of the discussions versus timing of when this report was largely written just didn't line up for us to be able to reflect that in the report. So if you have been part of those merger discussions and you don't see mention of that in the report, that's not a signal that we don't like that idea or it's a bad idea. It's just purely a matter of timing. And my instincts are that those mergers will likely happen. And so we'll navigate that going forward. The last slide is just to start putting some indicative or notional numbers in front of people. Particularly when we were talking about like the governance and resourcing for this project, you'll see in the report that, we recommend that you be confident that we have at least 5 years of funding put together before this project is started. And so this slide does some, again, notional or directional math, I would call it like napkin math, to start to show what those numbers could look like. These are very speculative, to be clear. Like, depending on exactly how things are scoped or implemented, it could vary a lot. And so again, like don't take these as definitive. They're indicative. But to build and sustain something like WASH Hub for 5 years, we want people to be thinking in the order of about $2.5 million, which is a lot. But it's also, and this is something that we got into in our conversations last week, a lot of that cost is the human requirements to be able to be staffing the help desk, to be able to be keeping up with new knowledge and information that needs to be added to WASH Hub, to be helping to foster and sustain or moderate any hubs or communities that are hosted on WASH Hub. And so, it's several $100,000 to build the beginnings of something like WASH Hub, which is no small amount of money. But when WASH Hub's up and running, we're going to need several people working the equivalent of several full-time people to be, really making this thing thrive and ensuring its success. And that's where the bulk of that $2.5 million comes from. So, I think that's a big number. Other people may or may not agree, but just want to start planting numbers like that in people's minds as we think about what it takes to really get something like this going over a period of years. And then I guess I'll quickly flip to this slide, but I won't leave it up too long because I don't want to railroad the discussion in any particular direction. But there's some obvious discussion points that we also talked about in the first of the coffee talks. But who are the people or the organizations that are interested in leading or otherwise participating in the project, as well as what is the expected or desired role of CAWST going forward? There's always a question of funding. So who could fund and who can help us find the funding to make a project like this work? And then, who are the people that can help the platform thrive? So who are the organizations and the experts that could possibly be supporting on the help desk, that could be actively involved in the various hubs and communities to make sure that they're being promoted and kind of curated as necessary to make them thrive. So we can talk about these topics and we can talk about anything else that's on anybody's mind. And so I'll stop sharing so that we can make eye contact as part of this discussion a little bit more easily. And, I'll turn it over to anyone who has questions, concerns, comments, feedback. We'd love to hear what's on anybody's mind. And hello
Dan, could I
to
add a few?
one or two names that joined while I was talking there. I heard the bings, but I couldn't quite follow along.
Dan, could I add a few notes just sort of from the perspective of the carryover from 1 to 2?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I would really emphasize is kind of having seen a lot of rise and falls of these online platforms over the years, particularly in the WASH sector, and being part of some of them. that emphasis on how to make it as a continued service versus seeing it as this, like, you know, library gets funded, the library runs for 3 years, and then library has to shut down or go static. I think we've seen that across multiple platforms within our sector as well as others. So I think that taking the time to figure out how to do the long-term piece is really important for it. And as well, and we've seen services also run a similar way. Great services that are out there, consulting, technical support services that have you know, stopped funding because of the way that they were designed. So yeah, just re-emphasizing that need to, you know, to make this work for the sector, we really need to find a way to keep it continually running with a lot of humans in the middle. So just want to emphasize that.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. So we've got
maybe I can jump in with a couple of questions.
Sure.
So really appreciate seeing the report and the findings that you laid out. I think I had a question around quality control and consensus when it's such a large resource and across so many partners. And so, you know, what are your experiences with this quality control and coming to consensus? Because I find even on a small subtopic that we're working on, there can be a wide range of opinions. And when you're working within one organization, you go with, you know, your organization's kind of prominent view, but when we're working across organizations, a lot of different opinions. And so I was curious to what extent you envision the hub, like how would you come around and to those kind of differences of opinions, quality control, and on the help desk function itself, because some things are very much like share a document and other things are much more customized TA, but even on something like sanitation, it could be very different what that TA, you know, each person to each person. So I think I had a question around that of like the resources, the quality control, and on the help desk function. And then my second question was around with the help desk. I noticed your response time I thought was still quite quick. And I was curious how much of that was partners were just asking for a tool, or if you had a lot of people asking for really tailored one-on-one support. So what we find is someone will come and they say, I would like a tool. And then they email us and say, now could you help me collect the data, analyze the data, and use the findings, which then ends up being like 20 or 30 days of LOE versus an hour.
Yeah.
And then just a topic, my third question was, you mentioned that the newer generation WASH professionals tend not to use email for technical support. And so I was curious, does that mean they prefer social media, or I wasn't quite sure what they prefer to get that support?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. The email question, I'm going to answer your last question first, because maybe that's the quickest one. You know, it varies, which I know was a very evasive and vague answer, but that's the reality of it. But, you know, we see things amongst the younger generation, not just in the WASH world, where, you know, having email address as a piece of information that you supply when signing up to access something is actually a blocker for a lot of people. Like they don't have or don't use email. You know, we like to lean a lot on the example of like in Latin Central America and the Caribbean, like WhatsApp is just dominant. Like entire thriving communities are purely built on WhatsApp in the sanitation and hygiene space, and even like communication from you know, someone who has run a training on cost related stuff, let's say like, you know, building, installing, and troubleshooting a biosand filter. The way for them to be able to keep in touch with and follow up with the people that they trained is WhatsApp. And so like that would be an example. And so, I mean, to be picky about what we wrote in the report, it might actually not be right to say the newer generation. It's just like, depending on geography and the generation, you know, email isn't the dominant thing anymore. It's still probably the broadest. It is without a doubt still our broadest communication channel at CAWST, but it's not as universal as, you know, maybe it is for the North or the developed world. And for the younger generation coming in as well.
It also came, just to add to that, it came from a lot of conversations with other organizations as well in phase one, where, for example, WaterAid had done an internal like study to see like where are their staff getting their technical support from, and they realized a lot of it was a trusted relationship, colleagues, through whatever means they have to communicate with them, which is often WhatsApp. And so, yeah, just we were trying to look at the pathways for people to acquire that technical assistance in their work, in their day-to-day work.
Yeah. Okay. And okay, I remember your first question now, Nicole, was around, like quality. Oh, sorry, you had a question about response time. Sorry, let me answer that quickly because I think like the quality and like that might be a broader one. So I'm trying to knock off the quick ones first. Response times, is that quick? Does it vary? I guess hearing the examples that you provided, reminded me that you know the response times for between when a question comes in and when it would be considered answered on our side are really when it's addressed from like a help desk perspective. And so it may take a couple clarifying questions and back and forths for the person or the people that are on our help desk to realize that it's like, okay, the right way to get this person's support for the topic that they're asking about is to introduce them to my colleague Toby or our partner in Zambia or whatever the sort of like handoff or introduction may be, which then can turn into, like you said, one of those like 20-day long engagements where they have all kinds of questions, and often in CAWST language we call that remote consulting support. So I guess it is worth keeping in mind that a 1 or 2 day response time is for concrete discrete questions like, can you help me find this resource? They will be answered, but often something that is resolved in that 1 or 2 day time frame. The resolution is really just like an introduction to the best expert that we can find to build a relationship and have that go forward. So maybe that helps clarify things. Okay, but now we have the big topic of curation, quality control. I don't know if you use the word moderation, but I think we could throw that into the mix as well. It's like who is determining what is said and where and to whom. So yeah, it's a tough one. I guess Olivier, I would love, or Toby, I'd love your thoughts on this as well. And I'm actually not going to answer the question, but I'm going to throw yet another dimension that we want to be really mindful of. And that is something that has come up in a few of the discussions we've had as part of the research, but it's, we want to be really meaningfully engaging local actors in the WASH Hub. And that doesn't just mean making it so that, people all over the world with whatever kind of like connectivity and access to technology they have, we're going to do our best to make it all accessible to them. But local actors should and could also be contributing to this platform. So they may be taking a resource that CAWST has built that's really tuned to one particular region of the world and adapting it and localizing it to their region. And should they be able to contribute that back to the global knowledge base that is WASH Hub and make it available for everyone else? I guess I would argue they should, but it's just like yet another dimension on like what does the quality control process look like, including making space for local actors to be able to contribute, not just the organizations and organizations like us that are represented on this call. So I guess I first would love to open it up for perspectives to other people on the call. And, if people don't have a lot to say, I'll share some of the perspectives that we heard during our interviews and our thoughts on it as well.
In terms of quality control, there is the balance between almost the gold standard, the academically researched and the key documentation that is that defines the problem and defines the best solution. And yeah, there is the local advice. And I talked to someone in Mexico who was saying, I would love to be able to put out my top 10 tips for water and sanitation in transit centers as people move through, and how to maintain them when you have got a roving population. And in terms of quality control, that probably doesn't need quality control. But yes, in terms of actual key guidance, key guidelines, standards. There is quality control there already, but yes, in terms of advice that is being given out, there does need to be some level of quality control, whether that's crowdsourced. I remember early on, Olivier, we were talking about a scoring mechanism that people, the top answers coming through. So there has to be a combination of all of those, and the ability to understand which is right in the right context, I think.
We can learn. Oh, sorry.
Francois and Lisa both had hands up. So I think, Francois, you're first in line according to the teams. Oh, you're muted, Francois. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying I was number 2, and then I moved up to number 1, but I didn't do anything. Yeah, I'm just checking one thing, because I guess you guys have like how much of the experience about knowledge point is actually because CAWST is you've been running knowledge point for. I'm not sure. I don't remember how much knowledge point is part of the WashHub thing. But I think I just wanted to get your is it going up, down, is it stable, is it the future, is it kind of challenge, is it the way to go, and then in there, jumping on AI, is AI something that you already included in the knowledge point workflow to some extent, to see how it contributes to making this platform still relevant? I'm saying still because it's part of my question. I'm kind of external to knowledge point, so I don't really know the activity. So.
Okay, so I guess you have Olivier and I have been very involved with knowledge point at various times over the last few years, and way back in the day of earlier versions of knowledge point, Toby, when he was at Redar in a previous life, was involved in it as well. So I think you've actually got a great audience to answer that question. I'll give you my candid assessment of where knowledge point is today. It's absolutely the right idea that we're trying to, the forums in particular for knowledge point, of like trying to be able to quickly spin up a topical interest group, is something that we need to figure out. By the numbers, like if we look hard at the analytics, I'd say the engagement in knowledge point is quite flat. And in certain topics, like Washam as an example, we've had pretty decent success in generating something that I would say is a community. And part of the reason for that is when we run, or partners run, Washam trainings, we direct the participants to the knowledge point forums related to Washam for the purposes of ongoing discussion and like peer support and sharing. So there's some life there, but I'd say that's far from universal. And so knowledge point is, to a degree, it generated a lot of the learnings or the understanding of like how hard it can be to get thriving communities up and running. As to AI, does it play a big role in knowledge point? No. However, I will tell you that there are people at CAWST that are experimenting with AI, and I know of at least one recent response from a CAWST employee where they used AI to generate the response. Now, they reviewed it and vetted it. It was a reason for them to try some of the AI that's available, and it was good enough that they largely pasted the response right back into WashHub. So it's starting to appear on WashHub, but it's not like there aren't bots or AI running WashHub, or sorry, not WashHub, Knowledge Point by any means. So I don't know if that helps clarify or provide an answer to your knowledge point curiosity. I guess, sorry, one last thing and then I'll stop. Does knowledge point or something like it feature prominently in WashHub? Yes. Like knowledge point is one of the examples of efforts across the sector where people have tried to create the concept of like communities or hubs is the the buzzword that I started to introduce in the report, to brand them a little bit. But just the idea that knowledge point forums are a very lightweight way to stand up a community on a particular topic. Again, looking purely at the engagement numbers, I can't say that it's been a runaway success, but there's lots of learnings that can be derived from that. And the fact that it doesn't work wonderfully yet, it does not deter us from the belief that that we need the way to be able to set up and create and curate communities that do thrive for a period of time. Others that have knowledge point experience, anything to share there?
Yeah, briefly, like we helped with, particularly WaterAid was primarily leading it, right, in 2012, 2015. We took it over. I say we as in when I was with CAWST. So CAWST really took it over from the tech side. It needed some work in terms of actually the effectiveness of the platform. We learned that over time, like with all these platforms and the other ones, I mean, we've noticed that we need to mix up the means by which and the channels by which people access information and knowledge, right? And I think that's the biggest learning. I was like, everyone tries to build a silver bullet, but none of them actually act as a silver bullet. I mean, we saw, the farthest one I think is Notes, like initiative with Weddick, and then we saw Dew Point by Cranfield in 2012, and then we saw Susanna was probably the most successful and still is in terms of the using the forum approach to interacting with humans, and I think Knowledge Point fits within those comfortable using that kind of interface. So it's really keeping in mind that people are going to need different ways to interact with expertise, and we need to be open to those different kinds of those different channels. Some people just want to talk to people at the end of the day. So you need those humans, you need the human service. Some people are happy to talk with a bot. Some people are happy to post something and come back to it later. Some people want, that full assessment like Dew Point used to do in 2009. So yeah, I think Knowledge Point in its way will work for the people who want to engage through that channel, and there still will be that. I think we are seeing an evolution in how people are accessing knowledge, so we need to keep that in mind. But it's yeah, it's keeping many channels open would be like the bottom line that I see.
Thanks.
I think Elisa's hands up has been up for a while, and I'm bypassing it because I'm number 2. But I think it's
Hi, I don't know if you hear me.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, hi. I'm sorry, I'm gathering my throat, and at the same time as I'll be speaking, so I hope I'll make my point clear. By the way, I'm Elisa. I used to be the RoadMap head of the secretariat for a little while. I don't know everyone, but for the help desk, and this is what, Dan, you were kind of talking about, but I'm not sure I understood correctly. And I don't know if it's an idea you had. I don't know. I'm trying to make it, but the idea is to have someone that is like full-time. And then would that someone kind of know or gather all the community that they can, I mean, like investigate what are the existing community, like the existing help desk. Mm-hmm. And then that person would be some kind of like focal point, like when someone asks a question, then they go to the different communities that they know of and they like ask the question for that other person. And so it's just like a relay of the different help desks that the Skype WASH team in France would not know the one in Latin America, and that full-time person is actually there to gather that knowledge of networks, basically. Is that the idea that you were explaining?
It may very well be, unless we come up with a better idea. And I think like we talked about this briefly on the coffee talk on Friday last week as well, and it generated some interest. So I'll just maybe replay some of that from my notes. So the way that we found our help desk works the most successfully is that we've got a very small and engaged team of a couple of people whose part-time job it is, and they just sort of share the responsibility, but they pay close attention to questions that are coming in, and we call them the triage team. And they, I'll speak of Brian, just put a name to one of the anonymous faces behind it. He's a professional engineer, but isn't necessarily an expert in any particular WASH topic. He's more of a generalist, but he's got the skills and the attitude to, in some cases, be able to respond directly. If someone is looking for a particular resource, he can find it and respond, close that case off, and it's great. But he also has the wherewithal to recognize, like, where, Toby is the right person to provide an answer, or Sunil, or Olivier, or we need to connect you with this Skype network that I just happen to know about because, I keep a pulse on the sector as a whole. And so it is a bit of it is a key role, and it does require someone who has, a fair bit of, what would you call it? Like, they need to be engaged with the sector and understand who they could lean on for, particular topics. I would also expect, like, for Brian to have an understanding of our CAWST employees. CAWST is about a 50-person organization, and who some of our key partners are around the world. And so he has a mental map of, like, who's the expert in this region on this topic. And so it's fairly easy for him to figure out how to triage and route meatier questions and topics. I think for something like the WASH Hub Help Desk, where the scope is so much broader, I expect that we're going to need to have a little bit of a cheat sheet of, like, topics and key individuals for the person who is acting as the triage or the point person for the help desk, to know who to refer to be able to get support. Because I mean, maybe we can find an individual who does have a mental map of every actor in the sector that could help, but I think that's maybe a little bit ambitious.
And also linked to that, the process is to be able to track questions and answers, and to gather that information back in, and to use that as a database of whatever previously answered questions. So again, that we're not answering the same question over and over, but you've got some ready-made answers for a lot of questions. And also, yes, as Nicole was saying, some level of quality control as well. That can be managed on. Yeah.
Does that help, Elisa? Oh, go ahead, Olivier.
No, I was just going to say, when, in the early days of CAWST, and we launched our online help desk 2016, and from 2016 to 2022, we had, if you actually look at the distribution of types of questions, you're really only looking at, like, maybe, I'm going to throw numbers out there, but it's very logarithmic in terms of, like, the ones that really need high quality, in-depth answers is quite small. There's a lot of noise, right? So really having that tier approach, like Agent Zero doing, they're really basic. I was just looking for this resource. They know this thing exists. Where can I find it? And the same happened when we were involved in supporting the hygiene hub, right? The hygiene hub, the COVID-19 hygiene hub, and that support model obviously was very different, because where the knowledge was held there was very few people who knew, like, the details. And so working with London School on that one, again, like, you had a dedicated team. And I think one of the things that is going to come up here is kind of, what is the trust network around knowledge that's going to happen with the WASH Hub? So who, we might trust them, but, you need the user to trust the source of it. So if we are decentralizing, which I think absolutely, like, use what's out there, versus the cost of trying to centralize the knowledge, you won't get the quality. It's going to be developing that trust network of, these are the people to go to. The user can trust the person, and then therefore trust the information that's coming from it. So yeah, that'll have to come up, the trust network of knowledge.
Antonio, I see you put your hand up as well.
Yes, thank you very much. No, just a question, not necessarily on the technical aspects, but mostly on what is happening next. Because I feel that it's a little bit uncertain of the decentralization or the centralized approach, the sustainability of the system. When you see the figures of the sustaining cost over 5 years are quite big, and how are we making sure that at least in this we have the WASH cluster buy in or involve as much as possible, because somehow they have some existing platforms, and I don't know if it will be good to think about how to strengthen the WASH cluster one, and like rather to be too ambitious and try just to see what we can capitalize from a platform or let's say an institution like the WASH cluster that somehow could maintain in the long term the WASH hub.
Yeah. Okay, so what are the next steps? And so there's I guess I'll replay some of the conversation we had a few days ago, because I think it really addresses this. The German Toilet Organization, part of the German WASH cluster, German Water Network. No, I forget what their other three-letter acronym is. Anyway, we know who we're talking about. They are looking to organize a event in currently late January, but we'll see when it actually gets scheduled, to possibly have a get together for those that are interested in actually getting going on this project and putting concrete plans together that we can actually take to funders. And that will likely happen in Geneva sometime in the first month or two of next year. So let's say this, there are meetings and workshops being scheduled to keep this project moving. But part of the work of those is to really nail down exactly what the future next steps are, to figure out what organizations are really interested in leaning into, taking WASH Hub from the ideas that it is today to the reality that it will be at some point in the future. And so, there's some urgency there to keep this going, because in the end, one of the most pressing questions that was asked in the first coffee talk is like, what's stopping us from doing this? Like, thinking's great, reports are wonderful, but it's like, what is stopping us from actually just like starting on this? And honestly, the only answer to that, in my mind, is, I do take very seriously the need for us to be confident that we will have access to the funding over a period of at least 5 years to keep a project like this thriving and growing. And so if we can gain confidence that we're able to, secure the funding commitments to be able to not just build something called WASH Hub, but be able to provide the service levels that we need to make WASH Hub successful over the course of 5 years or more, then, we're started as far as I'm concerned, even without knowing exactly who's going to be involved and exactly what the first version is going to look like, or what the first, micro release will be. Anyway, there's urgency to flip over into the, okay, let's actually make WASH Hub a reality, starting in the first, month or so of next year.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Go ahead, Olivier.
I just wanted to add, Antonio, regarding like the cluster and the role. I think part of what's going to be needed with this is understanding, like, it's not that there's not, WASH experts out there that are willing to provide, the support and the service. It's going to be the connecting the two, right? Connecting the user to the knowledge, to put it simply. And I think it's part of, I think the cluster can play a key role in terms of, because of how connected it is when you look at the national clusters and things like that. And so I think like the cluster will play a key role, and it's going to be breaking down the WASH Hub components. It's not just about having the expertise and the human resources to execute it. It's about creating that connection between it, and a platform can do that. Sort of the digital space can create that connection, but it's going to require a lot. I mean, there are so many services that were out there that still are, that people aren't using, right? Like there's a huge richness in the Susanna network. There's even in Knowledge Point historically, there was huge richness in the content. There were people who were like fully subsidized to provide technical support in WASH, yet their services were not being used by people. So it's not just about building the thing. It's really going to be about leveraging the existing networks to distribute the service. And I think that's where the cluster can certainly come in, technology platform aside, to create that flow, I guess, of connection between the user and the knowledge.
Yeah.
I don't know how that gets governed, like from a resourcing perspective. I think that's going to be one of the challenges. Like, we also learned, like, the reason like the hygiene hub was so successful is like they had, you know, $2 million from the British government to pay, you know, consultants to put their time towards answering questions. And so I think that's going to be the other question, where if you don't pay for someone to provide that technical support, can we rely on the fact that they are appointed to this, seconded by their organization to be a technical support person, but then it becomes on the corner of people's desk, right, in terms of being able to provide that technical expertise. So how do we tackle that? That's another question that we had in the second phase here of governance and resourcing.
That was a topic that came up last week as well, and I think the opinions expressed by others on the call, which ring true to me, was like, you know, there's the reality that everyone wants support, but then, you know, when we're asked to provide support, you know, it could be tough because, you know, we're busy with other things, and so that's just, you know, the reality of it. It's quite easy for organizations to commit to, say, give 20% of a person's time to, say, staff a help desk. But like Olivier just said, the risk of that is that by saying that 20% of my time, you know, is going to go towards staffing this help desk, you're necessarily making it a corner of the desk thing. Like, that is not my priority. That is inevitably going to get shifted down the priority queue because it's a 20% thing. And so there was some opinions expressed that you know, it feels like, at least for some of those key kind of like agent zero or triage roles on a help desk, that may very well need to be something that we'll look at making somebody in the world's and maybe more than one person's, but somebody's like full-time job, is that like they are there to make that go, and trust that they would. I no doubt we could find someone who would do a phenomenal job of that. But it may need to be something that is, you know, somebody's job, not just 20% of their job, or shared amongst 12 people on their team, or all of the other ways that are convenient, but maybe not super effective to staff something like that. All right. Any other topics or questions that we haven't touched on, or questions that people ask that feel like we didn't completely answer that we want to circle back to? All right. Go ahead, Francois.
Yes, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, so you didn't want to talk about this, but maybe a few minutes about merging with Initiative 2.1. Is this, how is this kind of answering, addressing, being a solution? What's your view on this?
Do you want me to go first, or Toby? Rock, paper, scissors.
I mean, the obvious part is that the Wash Hub would host the online resources, the calendar, and all of that around the training events. And I think that, yeah, that seems to be the obvious way. And I think that was originally how it was set out. But as these were packaged up, the training part became separated. But I think there always was looking to have a strong link between the outputs of 2.1 and where they would sit in the Wash Hub. And I think that's the most obvious linkage, and the simplest and the most easy to do, I think. Beyond that, it becomes more more complex.
Yeah.
But then it's not merging, it's hosting, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what the evolution of the conversation was, but I think it was a question of scope as well. Like, those initiatives, when they're initially designed, they had a scope, and if those scopes shifted from kind of like, if it's just about being the broker of what's out there, then yeah, it fits under Wash Hub, because Wash Hub is kind of like connecting everything in terms of the knowledge sharing. But if it's about more in the actual sort of the designing and more effort within curating and or creating derivatives of trainings and things like that, or like unique to the WASH hub, like original trainings and educational opportunities, then I think, yeah, it kind of deserves its own scope and space. But I think that those were the conversations we had, like this was many months ago, so I don't know how it's evolved with NTR, but I think it is a question of scope. That's what happened with 1.2 with the data as well, right? If it's just about curating sort of data sets and stuff like that, then yeah, it fits under WASH hub. But if it's about doing more original data work, then it needs to fit within its own space. Those were, again, earlier conversations. Maybe Selene has more, or Toby.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that other than I think I don't think there's any controversy in saying that, if WASH hub is meant to be a one-stop shop for some of the language that's been used for a broad set of things related to our sector, then if there are libraries of existing and upcoming and ongoing trainings and learning, so the 2.1 roadmap outputs, of course they should be visible prominently on WASH hub. So from call it a user experience perspective, I think it's an obvious yes, of course. 1.1, 1.2, and 2.1, the from an experience perspective, that should be one thing for people out in the world. Whether that means that in terms of behind the scenes in the WASH roadmap, those initiatives collapse into each other, that's a much broader discussion. I don't think there's a lot of controversy swirling there. Honestly, I think that one of the key pushes that has come from the midterm review is that there's a lot of initiatives, all of which are struggling to find momentum, funding, and few or none of which are highly confident that will achieve all of the goals or objectives that were set out for the 2025 aspirations of the WASH roadmap. And so maybe one of the ways to help accelerate that is to combine some of the broader initiatives together, just because maybe it's easier to get momentum on one or two broader initiatives than 5 or 6 smaller segmented ones. So yeah, I guess there's the user experience versus the behind the scenes operations divide as well. All right, just be mindful of time. We got about 3 minutes left before the top of the hour. If another big topic comes up and people want to keep chatting, that's great. Obviously going to make time for it. But otherwise, we'll be respectful of people's time and start to wind this down. Like Toby signaled at the beginning, we are more than happy to have future conversations on a particular topic, to answer questions over email or whatever channel you can find us on. So, this 60-minute window was, of course, not the only time that we're excited to talk about the ideas and challenges and opportunities that a project like this faces. So, if you think of anything else or you hear of anything else, please get in touch. Would love to hear from you.
And similarly, yes, look out from the German WASH network for invites to a workshop, probably likely to be in Geneva in late January, early February. So it'd be great to see you there to talk about what are the next steps.
Yeah, excellent. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the remainder of your Tuesday, whatever that may be, depending on where you are in the world. And I'm sure we will cross paths soon.
Thank you very much.
Hey,
Thank you.
bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Francois.